next one is it's an original lyrics with an old tune. I got rid of all the sectarian violence in the old tune. Because I don't like sectarian violence. Well, my name's Abel Organ, I'm from Grandma Britain. And for 45 years there I got myself fit. I was forced out of fishing back in 92. And I didn't know then what the hell I would do. Fate had arranged another fine turn with the old timely passing of the old copier. Who left me a letter, some books and a suit, and with that pickly free and all wooden fruit. Sure was not even 3 miles from old Barrel Sleigh. Oh, Ernest, he was on up the coast far and near, and traveled by and by to each home here. One Mozzie morning, right before he died, he come down to the house and he took me aside. Son, now you're bothering to learn a new trade. With the living I've done, all the money that I made. The big blazing seltzer, that's God's honest truth. I want you to inherit my old wooden flute. Turn wood, the tune that the flute couldn't play. So we took a long weekend to properly grieve. We took 6-7 beers and big good puzzle Steve up to his camper at Barishwabrook, along with the wife and daughter Sunday. Well, I might as well let that old on the shelf, for the flute knew them better than I know myself. They made me go sleep in this canvas tent, where I tootled away souls of my heart's content. Tooralay, if you want to find dildo, try to me today. So I packed my belongings on the OCN bus, then I took off for St. John's without too much fuss. For I don't own a motorbike, I don't own a car. In the city, sure Shakespeare to take yet the white car. 3 in the morning, the cops came by, with their sirens and screaming at the military. But my lovely neighbors, their babbies, their pets, just to welcome my musical journey steps. Tooralay, sure you won't play a thing with an orphan like that. That's what the RUC said anyway. I told them to fuck yourselves. Well, I never considered a life in the arts. I've been with the boys in the lounge playing darts, and here I can pleasure my whole life away. With the Grammys, the tune that the flute can still play. I'll never know trouble nor ill-favored dream, or lose all I got on a pyramid scheme. A homeless old tinker wouldn't marry a cute, so long as I cherish this old wooden flute. Tooralay, sure as 6 miles from Georgetown before a slaughter day. Tooralay, sure as 6 miles from Shea Heights to Robin Hood Bay. Bye-bye, sectarian violence. Get the fuck out of here. Yay! That was my plan. This is from a movie. See if you know the movie. Arizona moon keeps shining. I gotta wait till these boys are done.
gracious.
Close your eyes and dream of someone.
I decided to free my camera from the restraints that it had. I can now do this without anything else other than my hand. Aha! For some reason it doesn't want it rebroadcasting through the channel. All of a sudden the health is good. My name's James PFP. This is the Banjocast. Can't say that I've got a whole lot on the plate tonight. Can't say that I do. Yesterday I said it was Fives Day. Indeed it was Fives Day. I didn't work in my normal pattern of work yesterday. I did spend more time on media criticism than probably normal. I blame it on the time of the year. But what a day for media criticism. I don't see anybody in the chat yet. I don't see any numbers showing up, so that's okay. If you're only just joining me, welcome. If you're some time away from joining me, I anticipate your arrival with eagerness. In order to do so, I'm going to put the chat interface over to one side here. And I'm going to close that. You have to forgive me, I'm using a throat lozenge in an attempt to stop myself from coughing too harshly. So yeah, the camera is freed of its restraints, previous restraints. Consequently, I can do this now. You see how it gets me all the way through to the outside world, but you can't really tell it with the filters I've got applied. That might come in handy around about another couple of weeks. That's what I'm thinking. I might set up just a little bit further in the opposite direction to what I'm pointing. Toward the camera beyond you and that way. And if and when I do so, I think it'll be pretty good for taking shots through the window. I really don't want to do that. I am prevaricating on the idea of popping a second window off and over here so I could get to YouTube. And get to my history. Caught a couple of Joe Rogan clips that were cool. I don't know if I thumbed either one of them up. HA has had a big day, so has V. Random Rants of Ryan. I've been trying to figure out what to think of him. We might get back to that one. I participated today in the Hard News Network stream. That was pretty fun. V had this one, which was excellent. Big news today, Justicar put one up. This is what I started my day with.
Vladimir Putin contacted Donald Trump to thank him for stopping a terrorist attack over in Russia. And the lamestream media didn't like that very much. And if you look at the titles of the articles, if you just read the titles and you were pre-programmed to think that Trump and Putin were like bosom buddies, or Trump was like sucking Putin off or something, you would assume that the story has, you know, you wouldn't check the source, you probably wouldn't even read most of the text. You just read the title and say, oh, Trump is working with Putin again, haha, more evidence of collusion. What it is actually routine data sharing that stopped a terrorist event, which I would think most people agree is a good thing. But most people, their minds won't be changed about Trump and think that this is a good thing because they'll just read the titles and take it from the yellow journalist fake news. Here's the thing. I think sane individuals, people who have common sense, people who, you know, don't eat their own poo on a regular basis, I think we agree generally that it's good to have at least tolerably good relationships with the only other country with enough nukes to actually pose an existential threat to our existence. Like, if we got into a full nuclear exchange with China, we would survive. They wouldn't survive the encounter, we would. But if we get into one with Russia, we probably neither of us survive. We probably both get completely screwed, and there's really not much left. Meanwhile, you know, New Zealand becomes the new world power because it happens to be a first world country in the southern hemisphere. And the other major powers, Argentina, Chile, and South Africa. You know, because Australia would get hit by a few Chinese nukes at that point. Actually, at this point, Australia might become a Chinese vassal state. Yeah, that would be real fun. Yeah, what a wonderful world. You know, Merry Christmas, everybody dies, and you won't be cold anymore because any survivors will be, but anyone that didn't, they all get vaporized or they get...
I don't know how to describe it other than this, but Styx is one of his biggest criticisms against him is that he has a particular view of this nuclear holocaust.
Hideous radiation burns. Oh, they're going to feel really good. Yeah, when you're puking up your own organs. This is apparently what the lamestream media wants, because they seem to think that it would be good for Trump not to even conduct normal diplomacy with Russia. See, they've prevented the U.S. from right now effectively talking to and working with Russia where we can talk and cooperate because people have the view that the President of the United States, at any time he does talk about or to Russia, is in collusion with them. You've actually screwed up the diplomatic process. The media is so dishonest and so inept and thinks only about money to such a great, vast degree that they've actually attempted to poison the fragile relationship between the world's two major nuclear powers. That's what they've accomplished. Thank you for that, by the way. And Trump is absolutely right when he called out John McCain for trying to start a nuclear war because McCain seems to think he should shut up about it too. Oh, you know, screw the Russia. We want terrorism in Russia. Ha ha ha. Dead Ruskies. The Red Scare's still going. Cold War. Reds under the bed. Reds under the bed. He says before they drag him back off to the funny farm like they should have a long time ago. John McCain can barely even walk. And he's still represent the people of Arizona. I feel sorry for you if that's the face of Arizona. So, aren't you a younger state relatively? Like the average age of someone in your state's barely in the 30s? Unlike here, I think it's 42. Isn't that a little bit sad? You know, who will shovel the sidewalks? Obviously, Vermont needs, you know, lots of, it needs more migrant labor. Because there won't even be any kids left to shovel. Grandma will have to go out there with a flamethrower. That's the point we're going to get to in this fucking state. The Putin thanking Trump is normal. Trump trying to help through data sharing in a limited sense, say, hey, you know, give him this data so they can stop this potential attack. It's a good thing. Look, the Russians have done it for us too. You remember the Tsarnaevs. You'll remember them as the successful attackers of the Boston Marathon that nonetheless were under constant FBI surveillance. The Russians were doing data sharing with the FBI. Told them 2 years ahead of time, hey, you know, this dude's been radicalized in Chechnya. He's probably a threat. He's studying like explosives, other weird stuff. Keep an eye on him. And the FBI was openly, like, the Tsarnaevs were openly posting about, like, jihad and stuff on their, open in public on Facebook. Nobody did a damn thing about it. Nobody even, like, hauled him in for questioning. They didn't keep an eye on him. They said, oh, yeah, you know, screw Russian intel. It doesn't mean anything else. When you ignore that intel sharing, it seems that bad things happened. Our intel agencies, in that sense, were inept at the time. We finally get our act together. Get intel on a potential attack in Russia. It's been foiled. It's been thwarted. But there are people who want you to believe that Putin is such a gargantuan boogeyman that we shouldn't even be talking to the Russian state. I happen to disagree. Obama himself, 2012, what does he say? When little Mitt Romney comes out and suggests that Russia is our main foe on the world stage. Ha ha ha, says Obama. They're not an enemy. Look, the Cold War is over, Mitt. You know, not anymore, but it was at the time, I guess. They're not an enemy, they're just a competitor, says Obama. And the crowds cheer. Oh, Mitt Romney is so ignorant. So look at this old, white, outdated dude. Ha, he still thinks it's still like the 70s. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Look, Reagan was like almost half a century ago. Ha ha, look at chic and swift-minded Obama. He's got the right idea. Fuck the Cold War. Let's work with the Russians. That was what his fans were like at the time. Move on a few years, like, less than half a decade later, to this election, and all of a sudden, because of the poison of the media, those same people now believe, Russia is our main foe. We need more nukes, we need wars, proxy wars, arm the rebels, arm the militants, save your Obama, save us from evil Trump who actually conducts diplomacy with this other state. That's so whacked out, dude. It's crazy. You're trying to start a nuclear war. So all the so-called liberals now, they sound like John McCain. Doesn't that worry them? I get they've got such cognitive dissonance, I guess it doesn't. They don't even notice. Some of these people don't even appear to notice who they sound like. They sound like George W. I guess they forgot what George W. was like. You know what? I almost wish that Jeb Bush had won the nomination and beaten Clinton. Because you get a third Bush term and he'd be a single termer, trust me. So that you could see how moronic the Bushes are, how corrupt and slimy and ballless they are. They don't know, what did W do on 9/11? He ran off into a bunker to talk to Daddy and to his vice president who was in charge the whole time and was the one really calling the shots, but he had to wait for little W to show up to do the puppet signing ceremony on the start of the so-called war on terror. That's what the Bushes are like. And Obama was in denial that Russia was even anything beyond a competitor. Well, okay, let's take his word for it. And at the time, the Republicans were like, no, Obama's wrong, Russia's evil, Putin is an evil man. And now it's flipped completely. Now, the Republicans are being just as hypocritical. You now embrace the idea, oh yeah, Russia's pretty good, and they're bringing back sort of the moral traditionalism. Maybe they're more capitalist now than we are, arguably, at least in some areas. The press freedom and stuff is pretty bad over there, but, there's some good things about Russia. You thought he was the devil like a decade ago. Oh, he's the one, he's probably helping Saddam, he's probably helping Osama, and all this bullshit. That's what the world's like. Most people are opportunists and hypocrites. Like, you got a Sarsour who's an opportunist, or an Al Sharpton or something. A David Duke. And then you've got most of the lay partisans, they're just all hypocrites. Like, it's so easy to lead them. It's like, why haven't we had a dictator take over in the U.S. at this point? It's obvious that the majority of the population is very easily fooled. Well, that majority of the population could control the country if they were led by a dictator. Someone who had at least marginal control of the military too. They could easily take over the whole country and stay in there forever. They'd be 10 times, they could be in there from cradle to grave. They could be dictator and then appoint some kid to reign. Then we're going to abolish the office of president. We're going to have kings again. Because of my reasons. And they would be able to formulate an argument, I think, that would tie up both the left and right in the United States into knots and keep them from resisting. I really think that. It's rather scary considering the number of nuclear weapons in our arsenal. Now, isn't it? No. Yeah, actually, it's probably the only thing. Probably the intel agencies and the spy versus spy people keep on a sharp lookout out for anyone who does collude for that specific reason. Maybe if we didn't have an actual technical cold arms race that's still crawling along, maybe they'd take it less seriously and we'd be screwed by now. Maybe it saved us for some reason. No, I just think it's rather regrettable that the legacy media has managed to con half the population into thinking that normal diplomacy, a la what Obama was doing in the middle of his second term, before we had a real freezing in relations between the U.S. and Russia because of, the Democratic Party's bullshit mainly. It's rather regrettable that we've come to the point at which it appears that people who claim that we're the elite, we're the journalists, we're the ones with the PhDs and the master's degrees, we know everything, we rub elbows with the rich and powerful, so we know what we're talking about. So you know what you're talking about, you know all these wonderful things, and yet you have constant sex harassment problems, it seems, number one, can't keep it in your pants, use a lot of drugs, and you want to start a Cold War. That sounds sane to me. You are sane individuals. Clearly the epitome of rationalism and enlightenment in this otherwise dark age ruled by rubes. That's about all. Peace
out. Boy, does he go for it at the ending, eh? Throats out, knees together. Random Rants of Ryan, yeah. So I was listening to some of his occult videos yesterday as well, but very tempted to broadcast this one. I don't think it really matters. This one, I'm gonna play it.
We're gonna see a massive.
I'm gonna bring it back.
He makes the question, who in the fuck is you? Orion, random rants of Ryan. And he asks the question, who in the fuck is you?
Hey, how you doing? It's Random Rants Ryan. I'm Ryan. Who are you? Exciting times. If you haven't done any research on these altcoins that are coming out, blockchain technology, and some of these new companies that are springing up out of it, it's really exciting times. You're looking at the birth now of the next Microsoft, Apple, you name it. Name a big company. Some of these companies that are sprouting out right now, and ones that will come up here in the future, will end up being these big behemoths in the future. And if you're lucky enough now to get in on the action, you can buy some of their stock, and that's basically what these altcoins are. They're stock.
Now, I'm going to interrupt right here. I've been saying this, and he's confirming what I've been saying, as far as I'm concerned, which is the intellectual property of certain, or the intellectual property rights of certain concerns. This might not only be new companies, this might be companies which are themselves being positioned to take control of large blocks of previous intellectual property. And the coin, so to speak, is going to be made up of the data which forms that intellectual property. That's the stock. So to have access to those coins means to have direct access and right to use of that intellectual property.
In these companies that actually perform tasks. They perform utilitarian tasks, dealing with technology, usually routing information back and forth between each other. There's one company called Ripple, which is probably the most well-known, that's designing blockchains for banks to lower the costs of doing transactions and speed up the time. That's just one application. There's literally thousands. But buying these coins is really the new stock market. Now when companies, or not now, but in the near future, when companies want to go public, they're going to end up issuing these cryptocurrencies. The stock market.
I got to say, I actually like this video.
It's not going to entirely disappear, of course, but it's going to be drained, and it's a really amazing time in history because we're going to see a massive decentralization of power out of the hands of Wall Street and into the hands of just regular people. Regular folks bidding on cryptos. It's going to be a big, huge shift, a huge shift, and it's exciting. The democratization of society via technology. You know, we saw this with Uber, right? Uber is the largest taxi company in the world. It doesn't own a single taxi cab. What else do we have? We have Uber. To an extent, Craigslist. I mean, Craigslist doesn't even charge. Craigslist basically eliminated the charge that we all had to pay to advertise if you were a business person or you're trying to sell your car or something. It was a huge drain on the economy, and Craigslist comes in and says, scoops it out and says, it's free now. You also have Airbnb, right? Airbnb. You got a bedroom, a spare room in your home. Why not rent it out to travelers and stuff? It's beautiful to watch technology democratize and decentralize everything. There's nothing more that needs to be decentralized than the hideous parasite called Wall Street. Wall Street has had its free reign for too long. It's had too much power for too long. It has too much political influence. And that political influence, that political clout, that concentration of power is about to be completely smashed to pieces by cryptocurrencies and the blockchain. These new technologies that are going to be emerging from Bitcoin, or not from Bitcoin, but from blockchains, are amazing. They're amazing, and they're going to be replacing not just Wall Street, but a lot of other companies are going to be replaced. YouTube, for example, what you're watching now, very well may be replaced by a blockchain, a non-centralized blockchain, within the next decade. Very plausible. There's a company looking to do that. Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, etc., etc., etc. All of these blockchain companies are looking to revolutionize and decentralize. Okay? YouTube will no longer be able to dominate who does or doesn't say anything if it's ran by a blockchain. Right? It'll be completely democratic. So, wow. Exciting times. I'm
going to cut it here. I didn't actually listen that long earlier on, because I said, hey, I'm going to watch this on the channel instead. And this really, really intrigued me. I'm tempted to actually watch the whole darn thing tonight, and just take the strike if I get a strike. Because I generally leave a long set of comments when I watch something on Joe's podcast. Very tempted. Very tempted. All right. I'm going to post this to Facebook too later. Sorry about the ad. Screw you.
Thank you,
youngsters.
Mr. Chairman. Listening to this debate, it strikes me that there's a few things that have been left out of this discussion, and I do support the gentleman from Florida's amendment, and I follow the ideology of this in the process. One of the things I would say to that is that as I listened to the gentleman from Tennessee address this subject matter and raise his voice pretty strongly about the allegations of Obama versus Russians versus Putin, I would make a couple of points on this. One is, it's pretty clear that the Obama administration sent their people over to Israel to work against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, pretty much openly. Significant dollars invested in that campaign over there. The President of the United States, with at least the moral support of the people that had worked for him in the country of Israel, seeking to shift the results of the election against the seated Prime Minister, Bibi Netanyahu. Then the gentleman, no, I won't yield. I have a lot of things I must say, but thank you. Then the gentleman did object to U.S. tax dollars being used. I just came back not that long ago from the Balkans, where I sat in a place like Macedonia, and there I learned that the United States government, borrowing money from China and Saudi Arabia, had handed over somewhere at least $5 million in contracts transferred through USAID into George Soros organizations that were used to manipulate elections in the Balkans. And that's just particularly Macedonia, not including the neighboring countries that are there. And some of that money was used to translate Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals into Macedonians to distribute the books, and the rules for radicals and the actions of radicals were manifested within the election efforts in that part of the world. So I would say that the Obama administration is a long ways from clean on this as far as being involved in elections in other countries, not to mention little comments like the British, if you vote Brexit, you're going to have to go to the back of the queue. So that's a taxpayer dollars piece of this. But the long string that we should be looking at with this investigation and special counsel that is our request here, it goes a long ways back. It goes clear back to Huma Abedin, Anthony Weiner, 650,000 emails, which we still have access to. And the question that was answered to us by James Comey, which is, there was nothing to see there. We did a fast software search of 650,000 emails, and in the case of Huma Abedin and Anthony Weiner sharing laptop and sharing emails, there was nothing new in 650,000 emails. And what we've done in this Congress so far is just taken his word for that. Now, it seemed fairly logical to take his word at the time until you examine the investigation that he conducted of Hillary Clinton. Oh, by the way, it was a matter the investigation that had Cheryl Mills, her chief of staff, as her chief counsel in the room with Hillary Clinton, and both of them had a plea bargain of some kind. They were exempted from prosecution for by limited terms, but in any case, when you have this chief of staff who's a subject of investigation too, they're as counsel to the person who is the subject of the investigation, and we ask under oath, and I ask these questions of Comey, or about Loretta Lynch and Comey under oath, and that is, where's the copy of the transcript? Where's the audio files? Where's the video files? Who was in the room? We don't have the answers to any of that except no. If there were notes taken, we don't know whose they are or where they are. If there was any transcript of the deposition, then that doesn't exist either. Neither do the tapes of either audio or video. This is what looks like on its face is a sham investigation. Plus, they destroyed a tremendous amount of information, at least 30,000 emails, crushed hard drives, bought bleach bit, hired outside contractors to scrub the emails up, and we're to take James Comey's word for this, that there wasn't enough substance there to bring a prosecution, even though on a year ago, July 5th, James Comey delivered 15 minutes of the summary of a prosecution that was completely convincing to me, until they got down to the last couple sentences of that presentation, which is, well, we can't prove intent. Well, curiously, there's no requirement for intent in the two statutes that appear to have been violated. And furthermore, I look back in the records to the previous October and the previous April, Barack Obama stated into the news media record, he said Hillary Clinton would never intend to put our national security at risk. Hillary Clinton would never intend to harm America's security. That's October and April, the previous October and April. Well, James Comey latched on to that word intend, and they made up new law and gave Hillary Clinton an exemption for this lack of intent that they said they couldn't prove, which is absolutely proven by the facts that he delivered to us in the summary that day, and that there is evidence for. And I would go on. Not only does this trail lead through Hillary Clinton and James Comey, but the Loretta Lynch component of this as well. When you put this in place and you look at the example of them on the tarmac, it's hard to imagine they sat there for 38 minutes and discussed grandchildren. I think that might even be singular, grandchild at the time. We should check that. But the answers that we got from Loretta Lynch were far less than satisfying. And then that brings me to Alexandra Chalupa, who went off she's a DNC contractor that went off over to Ukraine to try to gather dirt on the Trump people. So bringing this around, Mr. Chairman, I'll conclude it with this, as my time will soon run out, and that is this, that the trail leads, I believe, also to Barack Obama. We need to investigate all of this.
Try cutting me off, you son of a gun. Wow. So yeah, that's well worth reposting. Jumanji comes tomorrow, whatever. Oh, this stuff is not worth reposting. Let's take a quick look here, see if there's anything happening. Caught some hard bastard earlier, as I was saying. I can close that. I was thinking about this too. I got a whole bunch of stuff on this project I was working on. Different things, I mean. So I finished this up last time that the stream was up, but I've also got this one, which is a different set of clips. And I'm going to just quickly snap them together this way. Grab on the Y, snap them over. This one thinks that it hasn't moved yet, but it has. That one's attached really to this. What I got here is a couple of phone clips. A couple of clips from my phone. I'm going to let them play through. I took it while I was not here in St. John's.
Good morning, whoever's listening. But hey, this is I don't know how to describe it better than this. This is a very British morning I find myself in. And it's not because of company, although I've got some lovely company. It's because of weather conditions. Let's just come over here and we'll see. Maybe we will. I'll start turning nice and slow. Very, very British morning. See all the fog? That's one thing. We'll keep turning. Maybe we'll have a better look. Do you see all the frost? Fog's one thing, frost is the other. A very, very British feel to this December 3rd. It's this, I'm not even tracking the day of the week. Come out this way for a second. Cedar chips there and dirt frozen right over it, but it's white like the snow, but it's the fog through the frost. Come over this way a little ways. Well, there's the sun through the morning fog and frost. I don't know if I can see it here. Let's try to swap over this way. Over there behind the sign. Can't get it. Won't let me change this way. I'll do it this way. Oh yeah, there it is.
Back that up a tiny bit.
Oh yeah, there it is. Unreal, right? So British this morning, it's not even funny. We don't get frost like this in Newfoundland. Hardly ever.
This was 3 weeks ago by my reckoning.
No, never. What? Never? Hardly ever? Hardly ever get a morning like this? But finish my smoke, I'm like, it's Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday. Today's Fives Day. Good time to talk to a camera. Today is Fives Day. I wonder, did the brook freeze over in one night of frost? Not much of a brook. Well, it is a pretty good brook there. New boat by 1 week. The water's still running. Might have a bit of frozen on it. See? No, not frozen up. Oh, no. I won't put butt down there for fear. It's not a bad one, but no sense in taking chances. Happy Fives Day.
Ain't over. Same day.
Stratford. Got Tiller House over here. Kind of colonial looking. Smallest one on the street.
This is a part of Canada you could misconstrue that you were in England. You're way farther away from the ocean than you would be in England. But other than that...
Goodness, what is this? A tidal plane or just low water? I guess it would be low water. Bridge over there. I guess they got that called the Avon as well. Makes sense, right?
So yeah, that was in Stratford. And there's other clips there, we're not going to get into them. Quite happy with this shot though. Could use some stabilization during the pan. Get rid of the footsteps. Right to about there. It'd probably be pretty good. I don't know if it's a combination of, it's mostly frost in the air. That's a set of clips that doesn't need any kind of fading between. I could use one there because there's a cut between one in the building and the other, but, or even here. So all I did was leave a little black bar in between them. Speedometer blend. This is to continue with something I was showing last night. This is a scripting interface for Blender. And this is the most useful when it comes to doing work with Python that's going to work into whatever the particular program you're running is, or whatever the particular animation you're working on is. So I'll give you an idea of what I mean. We have here a regular graph editor. Don't need to see what it does right now. We can see that the different things that are selected have these properties attached to them. The properties in this case are delta x, delta y, which are two distances. The combination of them will give us a v calculation or a velocity calculation, a speed. This is in meters per second. And then from the speed I can also calculate what the acceleration is, which is v now minus v then. I've got this calculated in another area. So if I go to the beginning of this animation, which I've laid out on this star pattern, we'll see that the objects will move. This circle will move first, or the sphere, and then this wireframe follows behind it some distance. That's what's tracking the velocity and calculating acceleration. So v now, v then are here. Graph of v calc and acceleration calc. And this thing here does all of the updating. So on this side of the window I have a script window. And we see the entire script here. For scene, it loads this scene for VM3, V meter 3. It takes the scene object V meter def, which is what this is called. I define a function called recalculate text, and this is the function. V float is this, V float 2 is this. Convert the floats to strings, and then these strings get displayed in this format. VM data body is this entire string at the bottom. So this is this. And in order to get this to work, I have to hit Alt P. The script runs. And now when I go to the beginning, it updates as the animation progresses. Now I'm holding down my, how to put it, the arrow key. I can also hit Alt-A and let it play on its own, hands free. So this locks it into 30 frames a second or tries to play at that speed. I can also rotate in 3D space around this using my middle mouse button. Or I can lock it to specific positions. Excuse me. Using the numpad, I can rotate as well. So the top is speed, or V, in meters per second. The second one is acceleration, meters per second squared, and it has a direction, like speeding up, slowing down. And then the kilometers per hour and the miles per hour conversion. We can see too that the various values are being tracked here. And that's the entirety of that animation. I do have a second one though. I can't help but wonder, is it in this same... Yeah, it is too, speedometer. So I'm going to go to the camera for this one. Yeah, I really don't have to do... All I need to see here is what the last animation I rendered was. Because I've already rendered this out. I might not have rendered it at all. Although it sure looks like it. And this is essentially the same set of calculations. The difference is the script needs to change for this new scene. And I believe it's this one. One for the V-meter car, one for the V-meter heli. V-meter heli, V-meter car, right? So these two are referred to directly in the specific script for this. What I'll do is I'll run the script. And it says, okay, cool. And now if I go back to the beginning of this one, I can do the same thing essentially. In this case, there's a car that's on a map. It's not currently rendering, and then there's a helicopter over here. and it's independently tracking what the velocity is for both and also what the acceleration is. And I'm not using real world data for any of this. I animated it all by hand and allowed it, whatever the numbers are, they are. So we could just see there that the helicopter got a 1G acceleration. I don't know if that's possible. In a horizontal manner, that'd be pretty significant if your helicopter could accelerate that fast. I also determined by using this particular practice, I can only call it a practice run, that it would be best to use 15 frame samples. Every half second I take another sample in order to get the data for these updated properties on either this or on that. So I wrote 2 other scripts to also aid with the process. What does it look like, he asks or wonders. See if texture doesn't do it, material might. Oh, show rendered. It's with the map. Maybe I should just let it start rendering. I could render it in a small enough fashion to make this faster, I suppose. 720, 720. That's a square image as well. Anti-aliasing I do want. I'll call it chopper car. Encoding doesn't need any audio. Bitrate will be 2400. AVI H.264 GOP 15. I'm going to call it H.264 H.264. And start the animation rendering. So here's the frames of the animation being rendered. One at a time. We can already see that because the script is running each time a frame renders, it's actually updating. And this has got some amount of time attached to it. It's measuring time elapsed, but it doesn't know what the time remaining is going to be. I happen to know that there's several thousand frames involved, so I might be taking a step away from the computer for a moment or two. That one will do. All three of them will. Check, check. 1, 2, 3. It's called Puff Puff Pass Fernando. Many years it's been since I saw a reefer in your hand. Did you find the bomb, Fernando? That dandy little glass one you got outside of Disneyland. I can see it in your eyes. You wanna try to steal across back into your brain. No, Tommy Chong made it, man. He's not here. It was years ago, Fernando, when we met in Tijuana at a swank resort hotel. Maybe it was Acapulco. You worked the bar, Fernando. You were really well connected to the Zetas, I heard tell. And it was tattooed up and down your arms, that wide variety of chemicals you sell. It was something in the E, I think, but not the drink, Fernando. Drinking mezcal from the bottle straight, the word can wait, Fernando. Though we never thought we would run out of grass. Got a dealer who delivers, man. Guy's got a van, Fernando. Got a dealer who delivers fast, as in the past, Fernando. Are you still awake, Fernando? Would you put me in recovery position if I'm faint? Am I breathing right, Fernando? 'Cause I feel a little queasy from the smorgasbord we ate. And if you think that it's too early for this song, I'm here to tell you it's too late. Than Fernando. Many hours, many minutes seem to last eternity. And the firelight, Fernando, it was fucking pretty trippy once we dropped the LSD. And then the magic mushrooms, ayahuasca, don't forget the peyote. Got into the nitrous first, my guts done burst, Fernando. Then a big old bag of coca leaves for you and me, Fernando. Though we never thought we could run out of grass. The coyotes, they got some in the truck, with any luck, Fernando. Inside 10 miles of that Churchill Square, he's got your gear, Fernando. Throws a couple extra papers too in the bag for you, Fernando.
if I never use my brain again. I could just go ahead and bleach my hair snow white. No, 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 I don't smoke it no more.
Tell you a short buskin' story. Guy with a free-rolled joint collects a crowd in the pouring rain. Then he hollers out, "What's the point? Someone spark me up, someone spark me up. Got a PRJ." Half of the people were stoners, oh yeah. The rest of them gave it a try. Passed around twice, felt mighty nice, and I watched them brain cells fry. Hey, come on, guy. Hey, come on, guy. It only gets so high. One dude wanted to steal it. The Bogart got into his hand. Tried to puff twice, or a older guy's gonna fuck your shit up. Bam! Don't you understand? Don't you understand? That's karma, man. Rolling down to the corner. Plonka, my song. And the crowds are pressing. I don't mind messing from noon to the break of dawn. And then I'll get something to eat.
Nice easy fade out there, huh? Ooh. I queued an extra couple there I didn't need. So, got a while to wait while the render occurs. That's the beauty of it. This one's attached to here, that one's attached to there. They're moving as the camera moves at a steady point between them. And I'm tracking over a section of map in my local community. In case you're watching and wondering what's being rendered. I think I'll also get to a little bit of arts and crafts as soon as the tea is done. And it's arts and crafts so that I can sit down and play the banjo maybe, or this hour of the night, maybe the dulcimer would be a better choice. And I think my tea is going to be done in a second. So I don't need these things on now either. Thank goodness. It's been quiet in the chat this evening. I'm surprised to generally get a little more action. I suppose it's only certain kinds of content that really get a heavy response though. High response. Yeah, I kind of like this, having the screen up so I can tell what you guys are seeing. I could also do this, I suppose. Tea. Wouldn't work on a boat, I don't think. On a boat, I'd have a pot and a burner all the time. Here, I put a pot on and add hot water to it. It's awful strong. Well, we can add hot water. It's not so strong that way. But it's damn tasty. So I got to talking there last night with a guy on stream, going over bits and bobs pertaining to Charlottesville. I guess now is as good a time as any to, well, maybe not to make a precise statement on anything. Excuse me for one moment. Yeah, maybe not a good time to make a precise statement on what I believe one way or the other with Charlottesville, but I do think that, well, for one thing, it is a very spectacular event, one that by its spectacular nature, shouldn't be trusted, especially the stories which came out at the moment that it occurred. I think those are the most suspect of all when it really comes down to it. The second thing is, I don't want to pimp my own content, but I think anyone who's really curious about what I'm going to say about anything should look at a video I put back. It was just before I started streaming heavy. Earlier this summer, I released one about Saul Alinsky, and why it was that about a month and a half or 2 months before Charlottesville occurred. In other words, why I was already sick and tired of hearing about Nazis. And Saul Alinsky is partly to blame for that. Largely to blame for that. More so than Goebbels. That would be my contention. Charlottesville occurred and a lot of people's heads got turned off from debating in anything even remotely looking like a rational manner. So it's the second reason why spectacularly needs to be mistrusted or questioned. The third one is that I noticed some of my own friends became a lot more cold after I took a stance on it, and one of the reasons was, if we look up we look up a lot of the responses that occurred on or after the time of the attack. Happy birthday George Soros was one of those uncontrollable trending hashtags, and it triggered the fuck out of a lot of people. And I think that's probably the best one ever. And Soros's name was mentioned earlier on in this very stream because it's in the public record. This is not conspiracy theory. This is not someone. I don't have anything against Jewish people in particular, or in broad terms or anything like that. I might have something. I might have a few questions for George Soros though, in particular, and it's not because he's Jewish. Aha. So yeah, I'm gonna do what I gotta do for my arts and crafts while I'm watching this render occur. You might notice that the camera is zooming in and out automatically. It didn't need to be keyframed. I did this animation by using mathematics. So it has some nice features. It also has some mathematically dumb features that would be probably better corrected. But the least amount of work that I'd have to do to animate anything, the better. And the least amount of work route in this case was to let mathematics do it. And it's a pretty simple calculation actually. There's two constraints being used on a camera and an empty. The camera is told to maintain a relationship between the empty in itself, and the constraints determine how much the camera gets zoomed. So if the two objects which are being tracked, the car and the helicopter, happen to be close together, the camera zooms in, and if they're far apart, it zooms out. It also zooms into a specific limit and no further, which I had to figure out first. Got a routine for my arts and crafts, I have to admit. There's a routine which is highly enjoyable. Sit down, do it in a certain... follow my own sense of, well, I do this first, and this, and this, and this, and this. Once it's all done, it's done. It's done right. Oh, yeah, I've laughed a lot at the Happy Birthday George Soros. Probably laughed more than I should at the Happy Birthday George Soros hashtag. But as I say, 2 months before that, I'd already been tuned into the fact that there was going to be a spectacular to watch for. and it took them 2 months to pull it off. Well, I also heard some criticisms at the time. People were saying, well, you got to allow the fact that the deep state is all going on holiday right about now. So some of them are out to have a bit of fun by doing that type of thing. And while it sounds crazy to say that, it isn't that crazy to consider. So indeed, I do believe there may have been a certain spectacular element of Charlottesville which evaded the scrutiny of the mainstream media. They may well be quite used to looking the other way at certain times of the year. If given certain signals first, they look the other way. I was highly motivated yesterday, actually, to rebroadcast something from RT other than Lionel. And that something would have been Jesse Ventura's, one of his more recent pieces that he does with them. I forget what it's called now. It's not Straight Talk with Jesse Ventura, but it's something along those lines. In any case, everything has to go through Jesse's filter. And I like the way he filters stuff. Don't get me wrong. But he was particularly poignant and pointed in his analysis yesterday. Or in his analysis recently. As is his wont. And when he's really there. Yeah, I actually do have something else I could be talking about. So what's the deal with Jesse Ventura? I guess that's the way to go into it. What's the deal with Jesse Ventura? Anyone who's listening, your thoughts, certainly would appreciate any interaction on the chat here. If you're listening after this has been uploaded and you're thinking to yourself, well, I can't chat back at you, Jim, leave a comment below. What's your thoughts on Jesse Ventura? Particularly, what's your thoughts on Jesse Ventura running for president? What would you say about that? Because I got a theory on that one. I have a fairly well developed theory on why didn't Jesse Ventura run for president last year. And there's a couple reasons for it. One of them is I think Jesse Ventura was actually planning on running for president sometime in the past, and he may well have picked the 2016 election, even 8 or 12 years before 2016. He may have already been talking about it in terms of his long-term strategies politically. And the reason that I say that is because he seems to have had a bit of a minor kerfuffle, an accident, if you will, involving another famous-ish Navy SEAL. And this particular Navy SEAL, for good or ill, I don't want to say anything bad about anyone in particular, living or dead, but this particular Navy SEAL, in his own book, identifies really early that when he signed up for military service, he applied for an intelligence job. And he didn't end up working in the intelligence fields, perhaps. He didn't end up working in the CIA, but he did apply for an intelligence job the same time that he was inducted into the SEALs. So I submit to you that I don't necessarily believe everything on the record pertaining to that Navy SEAL, simply because of this distinction, which the Navy SEAL himself drew, ex-Navy SEAL, drew in his own book. He mentions this fact. The same book is the reason why there was a kerfuffle with Jesse Ventura. Jesse Ventura ended up taking the publishers to court, and it just so happens that the wife and the family is dragged into it. But anyhow, Ventura may have been the only kind of even remotely libertarian personality / politician capable of defeating a personality like Trump. He would have been an alternative to the alternative that managed to take over the GOP nomination anyway. He could have even run as an independent had he been allowed to do so. But Mr. Ventura is no longer, as I understand it, while he still maintains his citizenship, he's not necessarily resident in the United States. Not year-round, anyway. And hasn't been for a number of years, basically since this kerfuffle. And if you ask me, Jesse Ventura probably won't be able to run for president, which is why he talks on RT now. And he talks really, really clearly and really, really frankly about the types of things he used to agree to that he doesn't agree to anymore. For example, he mentioned in his last show that he took a contract which prevented him from being on the media at all, but he still got paid as if he had been. Interesting, right? Thank you, Jesse. Very, very honest of you. I think we need more people like you, Jesse. We really do. The funny thing about it all is why the particular book with this particular peculiar claim, which was not in the movie. So I went through my Grizzly Man listing not too long ago. That was a couple of videos ago. Went through the whole of the Grizzly Man documentary. That's by Werner Herzog. And I can only say that that's peanuts compared to what I did in terms of the comparison work between the book American Sniper and the movie American Sniper. In fact, I even sent some of my completed work to another YouTube channel. I sent it to CinemaSins to see what they would make of it, and well, I never got a response on it. But instead of being the sin, I didn't consider it just CinemaSins. I determined by referring to the book what the sins of the cinema had been for that particular movie. And one of the things that I mentioned in that listing is, of course, that the Navy SEAL in question had applied for an intelligence job when he volunteered. I don't think that should escape attention. I really don't. I think that should be one of the key points to bear in mind with the entirety of the story of American Sniper. Right down to the tattoos and the Yeehaw Crusade bit. I really, really do think that it bears more conversation, not less. And if you're wondering why it matters, the real world impact includes that Jesse Ventura probably cannot run for president now at all due to the machinations of the intelligence arms of the United States government. If you think Trump is ridiculous, please remember that Jesse Ventura would have been able to defeat Trump in a United States presidential race, the same as he could have had they met in a squared circle at WrestleMania. That's essentially what I'm saying, and it's true. Perhaps you disagree with me. If you do, let me know in the chat, or as I say, leave a message in the comments below in the video. But discussion on American Sniper. I'm only too willing to also engage on discussions about what may have happened or occurred with that whole story. I'm not entirely sure I believe any of it. The book was intriguing and not necessarily convincing, whereas the movie made me question whether or not I should even trust the book, let alone the official narrative. And there was at the time, and there still continues to be, a crisis of confidence occurring with certain aspects of the various powers that be, not only in the United States but worldwide. Canada seems to be part and parcel with what happens in the United States. You can see here in the animation the beauty of having a tracker for both acceleration and velocity. So you can tell the moment when the acceleration ceases on the car and it starts to coast to a slower speed prior to making a turn. Or look, we came to another point of acceleration. As I say too, in the animation we're watching, the data that I'm using for the car and the helicopter, I've hand manipulated and keyframed. It's imaginary. None of this is real. I'm pretty sure that I've got the scale right. I mean, the actual scale of the car, the helicopter, and the map are correct. So the distances I'm measuring to get the speed are correct. So I can use the numbers that I know from my own life experience as a guideline, at least for the car. And my best guesses for what the helicopter might be doing. For example, the helicopter's gone a fairly short distance. Its speed has been regularly decreasing, and you can see that in the acceleration as well. But if the helicopter were going up in the air, that's what would happen to its speed. It would be transferring its forward momentum to altitude. Here we are. Brakes being what they are. Oh, he's actually at a light too. Look at that. I used a section of local map for this particular test. Doesn't matter where it was, it could be anywhere. I did want to use an area that I was sure about certain assumptions. There's a grid in that particular part of town. More of a grid than is normal. So I could work with the grid of the streets. And also it's a commercial and industrial area. And as such, the blocks are fairly large. So we're looking at a 200 meter or 300 meter block division. Takes several seconds, therefore, at 100 kilometers an hour to make that, cover that distance. Still, I've been thinking about a lot of different things. The Random Rants of Ryan. That's an interesting channel. I think the thing which turns me off from Ryan the most is knowing that his religious beliefs do influence what he says. So he cares about establishing the veracity or the truth of particular positions by, for example, worrying about satanic associations. Okay, you can worry about, if that's what you want to worry about, go ahead and worry about the Luciferians or the Satanists or whatever. I'm surprised that you need to establish moral superiority on that basis, though. In the same breath, he seems to be okay. I mean, he seems to be fine with the idea of working with digital currencies, with bit chains or blockchains or whatever you want to call them. And the reason is, yeah, exactly. If the Bitcoin isn't the digital currency to be feared due to the mark of the beast, then what is it? Oh, it's our mark of the beast. Oh, I see. That's what's interesting to me, is that this primary contradiction doesn't trip his own head. He hasn't caught up with that yet. The number of the beast doesn't bother him. As I said when we played through the clip, though, the random rants of Ryan clip I played earlier, there's a link in the description. I think it's the second one. He's absolutely correct when he says it's a modern form of stock to have a Bitcoin or have some kind of a control of the actual information, to be given not only privileged access, but the responsibility of controlling access to it. That's where the actual value of the stock is. It's better there than in dollars, which could flop and burn overnight. Intellectual property has a value of its own, and the security for that property are the coins. It's the keys. It's not only a key, but also the safety deposit box. It's both sides. So, and that's the crypto part. Normally the media hand waves this away by saying something along the lines of, well, it's anonymous. You can't tell who owns what. You can't say, everything can be. Well, yes and no. Yes and no. It might be anonymous, but it's also non-distributed, or it's also non-centralized, widely distributed. And because it's widely distributed, it can't be controlled centrally in the same manner. But it also means that there can be no real denial of service or access to it. And that's a big issue. Bigger issue than is being let on in the media. But hey, in case you didn't hear me say it the first time, this also means that certain intellectual properties will become available sooner or later for direct fan service. What do I mean by that? I mean that when you go to some productions, when you go to take part in or purchase how to put it better than that. I really don't think it can be. When you go to patronize certain intellectual properties you like, for example, Star Wars maybe, or even Star Trek, you won't be necessarily participating only by paying money at the box office. You might also have access to the creative intellectual property itself, or the process which creates new property. I'm not kidding. Access to certain information will be made more available, and the ability to directly get your fan service from it. What's currently called fan service, when the things which fans like the most is, as I say, in Star Wars. I haven't seen it yet, but I'll be seeing it shortly. What's normally called fan service right now is when you sit down in the theater and the thing which everyone wants to see, the Wookiee cry, or I've got a bad feeling about this, whatever it happens to be, the fan service will change so that it's more like a fan film. It's smarter than the regular schlock because the fans. I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. It might even be that, yeah, you won't pay to see a fan film at the theater, but you also won't have to worry about being sued if you want to produce a fan film, because there's nobody to sue you for the property. And nobody knows who owns the property. If the property owners aren't going to lose their shit because someone decides to make a not-for-profit fan film, who gives a fuck? That's my point. Cryptocurrency allows that to occur. And that matters to some of us. It matters more to some of us than others. It also shows, I mean, right now the thing which acts against direct fan service, it kind of is the system itself not liking, doesn't like to be shown up in a not-for-profit way. People who don't have access to millions and billions of dollars of development money are still able to make a product at the end which is more entertaining than the real thing. That's what causes them angst. Yeah, see? Yeah. Getting up about 3,500 frames, I think, will be close to the ending. Maybe it's closer to 4, I don't know. That's over 100 seconds of animation. As I was saying earlier, I got a routine when it comes to my arts and crafts. It includes when to do this, when to do that. I've got a little... It's so how to describe this? It's the Robertson end of a multi-screwdriver for the ramming portion. Make sure it's rammed in but good there. Make sure the powder stays dry. They said paper cartridges were inefficient. And yeah, I roll butt in. I roll with the roach on board. It has been an interesting time to watch the media. It is. I can't think of another year that has been more entertaining, while not necessarily terrifying, but entertaining in the sense that I know the smartest people I know can't stand to watch the news at this moment because the trickery and the lying involved to try to convince the mass, media, not even the masses themselves, that they're going to get away with it. Oh yeah, we'll write all of this shit for you. Don't worry, you can just think of it as a year off. We'll pay you. And at the end of the year, your own currency, your own fucking currency will be devalued so much, you're going to wish you had Bitcoin, is the story at the end of 2017 for all of the MSM. I've been making another joke all year, and I haven't made it lately, and I'm going to make it right now. Give me an A. Give me a U. Give me a D. Give me an I. Give me a T. What's that spell? And the mainstream media goes, Putin. Putin. It spells Putin. Mad cow theism says, Putin. Putin. That's all that, for some reason, the only word they know. It's got 5 letters. Putin. Putin. Trump calls Putin, stops a terrorist attack. Mainstream media goes absolutely apeshit. Yeah. I personally can't believe that one. But hey, is it any wonder that the mainstream media doesn't want a change in the tax regime or to be audited themselves? Is it any wonder? After last year, you would wonder about that one. Seems to me like that would be the first thing that would have to occur, given the level of bullshit evident in what happened in 2016. Now, I'm not even talking about this year. I'm talking about last year. 2016 alone had so much crap in it. How could they have escaped audits? To say that only CNN has the problem here is plainly wrong. I can't get away with that argument anymore. Why would I focus entirely on CNN when it seems to be endemic to a whole bunch of the motherfuckers? Well, I'm glad you asked that. I hadn't really thought it out, did I? Oh, it's over 4,000 frames. Cool. I'm cool with that. Yeah, exactly. I'm really glad that I watched that Faith Goldie little stream that she posted to her Twitter. I'm really, really glad that I watched that. Simply because, too, there is no question in whatsoever in my mind now that there had to have been a certain amount of jockeying for political position that was occurring behind the scenes and all prior to the Kilroy event occurring at all. And I can't help but wonder whether or not the whole NDA thing was to, for lack of better terms, trick a certain group of particularly power-hungry types, just to trick them out into the open into withdrawing. And they can claim victimhood if they want, and if they do, then it even makes them look more like what they are. Say that they were no-platformed, and when in reality, they were trying to take over the whole. They were trying to take over the whole thing because importance or something. Oh, everybody was only coming here to see this particular guy anyway. Whatever, Faith, whatever. I don't believe that one. And that's my arts and crafts taken care of. Wonderful. Still some distance away from the end of the render. I give that a moment or two. This is where I have to stack all the cartridges. Got a nice little clip for that. I don't know if you can notice this on the frame by frame over here on the side, but the helicopter's blades are animated. The other nice feature which I like about Blender in particular is once the render is finished, once it's completed, you can see the helicopter is currently making 200 kilometers an hour there. Once the render is completed, you can play back the render that was just completed internally to its own program. It maintains it in memory, which sometimes is nice depending on the size of the file, and sometimes it isn't. Wow, the speed of that chopper. The car is creeping up there. Can a car make half a G? Yeah, I think a car can make half a G. You see how fast it is in a minute. I did two things in particular in this render which I was testing out. One of them was this square format, the frame, with an orthogonal camera, so there's no perspective to consider. Therefore, I could render something which is at a much bigger resolution than this, and then play back a part of this sequence, like crop it to fit or whatever. If I didn't necessarily like the framing of the camera. My rationale for this one too is that helicopter isn't constrained to the roads, the car is. For each frame now, the software recalculates everything for these two numbers, or sets of numbers. Get a little faster toward the end, I think. Trying to remember the command is. I think it's Control F11, and it'll give me whatever the last render was. It's also up here under the different context menus. I was sitting by the river and I seen the British coming. Must have been 100 of them beating on the drum. Steps so high. Hear the bugles ring. Sat beside the cotton bales, we didn't say a thing. Oh man, some of the old jokes didn't survive the 60s. The 60s nor the 70s. Particularly good example of where I might have wanted to use two different colors for the text. Or attach them more to the objects that they're pertaining to. And keep them separated. I guess normally there would be a static display somewhere in the corner of an image like this. One would say heli and the other one would say car, and that way you'd keep them straight. That's the end of the animation. Great. So, if I go up here to window, no, it's under render. Play rendered animation, control F11. And the animation that was just made is in this window, and I can zoom in. No, I can't zoom in on it. I can scrub through it though. Here. I can choose what point to jump to by just left clicking left and right on the image. And if I hit spacebar, it'll start playing again. As I'm watching it happen now, this doesn't look too terrible. And so as I said during the render, I'd like to know that a helicopter could do that before I ever try to animate that again. Get a burst of 1G for about a second long, I don't know. And from 0 to 1G in no time flat, that I don't know either. Not for sure anyhow. Nowhere close to. Likely, the car couldn't make that kind of acceleration around any curve either, around any turn. You get an idea there of how long an acceleration burst is required to get a helicopter that fast. I mean, you want a quarter of a G for 5 seconds, 6 seconds. You'd be going a couple hundred kilometers an hour. Fair. Seeing as a G is close to 10 meters per second squared, I mean, pretty darn close. Excuse me. That turn, no way in hell. For the car. Car would have rolled up over the curb there and landed in the grass. On its fucking roof. But hey. The Steve McQueen fight or car chase you never saw. Here you go. Look at that. So yeah, that's Blender working in conjunction with the 3D window on one side of the equation and a script specifically written to update some of the elements in that Blender instance. So in this case, it's in a scene block called speedometer. And the first one that we showed you was, or I showed you, was the F curves one in this window. And yeah, that was a lot of talking. It's a lot of talking while other stuff was happening. And all that too for, what was it at the end? Let's say Control F11. I don't know if the total time is told here. 30 frames a second and 4,300 frames. I'm lazy tonight. Just terribly, terribly lazy. So, haha. A little over 2 minutes of animation. Certainly, I know that that's 300 frames is 10 seconds, so let me see, 3,000 frames would have to be 100 seconds. That is right after that wonky turn. Real question is, can you make the turn at the speeds indicated? And maybe, if you got as low as 30 by the time you started that turn, maybe. And I could do this again in 3D or whatever. It wasn't my intention to worry about 3D information in this particular project. I'll show you why, I guess. I still have a screen, like a script window in this particular. Shift curve pi is a whole other deal. Speedometer. In this case, the camera has been set to orthographic mode, and the scale is being controlled by what's called a driver. The expression for the scale is make it at least 60 plus whatever the distance between X and Y is. So as this decreases, the scale increases, zooms in. That's what's called a scripted driver. I could do that by quite literally clicking on it and entering in a script directly in this box if I wanted to. But it's being done in a different manner. Where to? I guess that would be in the driver's panel. All right, so it physically measures the distance between these two. We can see a blue line here on the screen as well, which indicates it. This particular value then gets passed forward to here. So it's entered in as a scripted expression. The rest of the time, things are determined by curves. For example, there's the car, which has a V graph and also V squared graph. Oh, I can't seem to select it. Speedometer. V meter car, V meter hello, the car. Some object. Let's see what's selected. I would have thought that that was not the map plane. Nope. Can't select the car either. Huh. Yeah, that is the helicopter. I actually don't think, yeah, those are not the things which are being keyframed either. There's a controller for both. Controller, some object, controller, car. So there's one of them. And controller, some object. And there's all of our graph. Control points that determine the motion throughout the animation. And then from this data we work out the rest. Two of these for location, one of them for rotation. Rotation in blue. So the raw rotation direction is being mapped with number of rotations above or below 0. So one rotation 360 here, and then it goes to 720, so on. Controller, car, ghost, and then some object ghost. Here is a copy of the XYZ location 2. No. Here's a copy of that data in 2 dimensions. Well, it's been graphed once to V graph, and then a V squared graph figured from it. So we can see them both at once if I select them both. So you overlap just a little, and then where they don't is when there's a change of direction. Or I should say, when there's a crossing, that's the change of direction, and then the non-overlapping parts is the raw distance, which gives me a number one way or the other. Plus or minus, i.e. that's the squared graph, that's the V graph. So all of my numbers come from the difference implied between these two. Both of these are being tracked here, and both of these values are what's passed forward to the script. V graph, V squared. V calc and A calc, we get them from there. These go to figure out what the calcs are. Delta V calc, A calc. And as I said earlier, the sample size is also there in the scripting. Expression is V now minus V then divided by the time frame 0.05 or 0.5, sorry, 0.5. Or in other words, half a second is the sample size. Every half a second there's another data point. That one's even, well, it's the same difference, except it uses a square root on the top part of the expression. So square root of dx plus dy, again divided by the half second. These are straightforward pass values from one place to another. Object's current location versus the delta between the previous location and the current location. Previous location, half a second ago. And for this reason, I think Blender is absolutely excellent once you get past its learning curve. And the learning curve is entirely introduced by the workspace. The workspace is freeform. You can do anything you want with it within these specific constraints. And if you know how to code, you can code your way around a constraint. In fact, there's something called a constraint in Blender. This is a joke for the masochists. I guess the sadists too, really. Yeah, we're doing just getting over 2 hours. Yeah, I'm gonna probably call it quits for just a short time, maybe a few hours. My name is James PFP. This is the Banjocast. I will be joining you at some time in the near future. Thanks for watching. Comment below, and I'll see you next time.